There was one dark night of the soul that I went through where I cursed God and I said, I don't believe that you're real at all. I don't think that there's any supernatural realm. I don't think any of this is real at all. And the best way I can describe it is that I think that God removed his hand of protection over my life for about 4 hours. I went crazy. I can't believe I'm going to say this on air, but I...
Ruslan.
Tell me, in terms of your story and getting to this current destination of making videos and impacting people on the internet, people may know that, but they may not know a whole lot about you personally and how you got here and how some of this has been a byproduct of your practice of faith, right? You've worked for a massive media company that many people would know where they're going to remain nameless for this interview. You've traveled and you're married. So like, give me a bit more context on how you got here to where you started and what was that journey like?
Through a spiritual lens?
Yeah, I mean both.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess the reason that I'm always trying to draw a distinction between having good ideas about God or true, theology as compared with knowing God is because from, let's call it 6 until around 19, I feel like I was mostly in that first camp where I was raised in a Christian home.
Okay.
I, went to a Christian high school and sort of was getting my theology screwed on nice and straight. And I'm not saying anything against truth in it or anything against theology, but it really wasn't that personal. And I would not really say that I was daily walking with God at that point in my life. And we'll leave it at that. And then at some point, though, I feel like that creates cognitive dissonance. And for me, it was there. Actually, funny enough, there's this artist. I'm curious if you know David Bazan, formerly Pedro the Lion.
No.
Christian artist who was like one of the first to deconstruct.
Okay.
And he had this album that was basically like a breakup letter with God. And that album articulated so many of the things that I was going through and thinking at the time. If you knew this would happen and made us just the same, then you, my Lord, can take the blame. Did you push us when we fell? All of these ideas that he communicated in a really beautiful, poetic way, but that brought to the surface my doubts, my, in particular, hell and determinism working together. Whoa. What's going on here?
Were you raised in a Christian home?
Yeah.
Did you have a more Calvinistic leaning? Okay, yeah, that's
and I
very common.
Yeah.
Not the Christian home part, the Calvinistic leaning. If you have a deterministic view of hell, that's a really dark abyss to stare at.
It became very difficult to see how God could be good, loving, and powerful in light of eternal conscious torment and determinism. That was a very
those three together don't make a lot of sense.
The math wasn't math, and very much for me. And again, I would still consider myself reformed in a great many ways. But some of how all that, the place that all of that together brought me to was a very dark place where I really questioned. It's funny, first the goodness of God and then the reality of God. And I think there's something about that that's very, very relevant.
The connection of there. So would you say now you still hold, not necessarily to the same soteriology, right, that ultimately God does the saving, which some people still hold to, but would you say you still hold to the idea of double predestination, that God damns people to hell and saves people?
My channel is very, very pointedly aiming at mere Christianity.
Aha! I like it. I like that answer. You could tell me off the record. No, that's a good.
I just think that the church has notoriously divided over all of these secondary and tertiary issues. And obviously, I have my own theology, but I really think that in this moment in culture, it's so important to aim toward unity. Again, maybe we should start aside like theology podcast, whatever. But the point is this, is that God is, I came around through, so I wrestled for about 2 years. I doubted for about 2 years. I put everything on the table and really, howling at the moon, long walks on the beach, all by myself. I don't get a God, sometimes even cursing God, just getting to a really dark.
This is from 19?
This is like my first year and a half of college.
Okay.
Thankfully, I was by God's grace surrounded by really legit people at that point, both professors who I could ask hard questions to, and then also like friends around me that were like, oh, I dealt with that years ago or whatever. And basically just kind of this whole thing, but it really ended with just God himself, just as a process, kind of like you said, not necessarily, I could circle the date on the calendar when it all clicked, but really God is a process, just walking me through a lot of the stuff and getting me out to the other side where it's like, okay, I'm all in on this. This is real. And it's weird because I know that I have a more emotive personality, and I know that. And I know that God doesn't work the same way with everybody, but God, and I don't know how else to say this without sounding woo-woo, but God has revealed himself to me in a way that is now undeniable for me. He has just met with me enough times, encountered me enough times, and allowed me to experience his presence to where it's not, and again, I'm not diminishing the role of truth at all, but I'm just trying to say, for me, it is no longer just a set of propositions. It is a person who is my friend and who I love. And
was that on the tail end of something miraculous happening, of some sort of spiritual encounter? Like what happened that made you feel that way?
A lot of different experiences in worship, in prayer, alone, with people, whatever. There was one dark night of the soul that I went through where I cursed God and I said, I don't believe that you're real at all. I don't think that there's any supernatural realm. I don't think any of this is real at all. And the best way I can describe it is that I think that God removed his hand of protection over my life for about 4 hours. I went crazy. I can't believe I'm going to say this on air, but I peed my pants. I climbed a tree. I punched an 8-inch deep hole in the ground. That tree, when I touched it, and I wasn't taking drugs. This story is going to sound crazy, but I touched this tree and 100 birds flew out of it and splattered into the building next to me.
Whoa.
I mean, it was the most demonic, and I don't believe that Christians can be possessed, but I was extremely afflicted in this moment. And like I said, I just think that God removed his protection for a little bit of time. This was during college. This was now 4 a.m. This was after me having a long conversation of doubt and all these things and just vocalizing like really bad things into the air. And then finally alone, pretty much cursing God. This goes on for, like I said, about 4 hours. That was at midnight. And then at around 4 a.m., God wakes my roommate up out of a dead sleep and basically tells him, Brandon is in trouble. You need to go to Brandon. And he walks out. We kind of looked at the map of the campus and whatever, and I was over half a mile away from him. And he beelined it to me and found me there like Nebuchadnezzar, just out of my mind, like an animal, just not in a good place. And he prayed for me, prayed over me, however you want to put it. The storm gentled. I came back to my senses. And that night ended with worship. That night ended with a cappella. Our God isn't awesome. God, and just this really sweet moment. And that for me was a turning point where I was like, okay, the spiritual realm is very real. And God let me get a little taste of hell in order to kind of snap me to my senses and stop playing around with what I was playing around with.
So you're experiencing a darkness based on the things you're saying, the questions you're having, and the way you're processing these questions, while at the same time saying there's no spiritual realm, experiencing the darkness of the spiritual realm, and at the same time God is showing up in a supernatural way to your buddy in a dream and telling him, you need to go find Brandon.
Yeah.
And he goes finds you.
Yep.
On campus.
Yep.
Where were you going to school at the time?
Where?
Yeah.
Palm Beach Atlantic University.
Okay. And what were you studying?
I was triple studying film, English, and psychology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Triple major?
Double major with a minor. It was psych and film, and then English minor.
Wow. Okay. So what happens after you finish college, and how do you go from all of that, and then you transition to working for a couple of media companies, and then?
Well, okay. So the quick plot points is from about the time of that story on, I was like, it was a real big transformation happened, and it was cool because God gave me a hunger and thirst for scripture, and all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm not on the fence. I'm not doubting that. Like, I'm all in, basically. So if this is what reality is really about, then let's go. And so right after I graduated college, I went on a 3-month-long missions trip to Africa, and that's where a lot of the supernatural stuff happened. I could talk a lot of stories about that. It could take up hours, but basically, God, the finger of God is just amazing, and the miraculous is real, and God is doing things right now in America too, but you really, for some reason there, I don't know what it is, but you just see his handiwork in the miraculous in really, really cool ways. And so I just experienced dozens of things that it's just like, this is ridiculous. There's like, this is undeniable. And then I was on the spiritual mountaintop of my life coming back from Africa, because you see all that, you're around these people. We did nothing but live out the book of Acts for 90 days. It was awesome. I was with people from all different nations. We all got together and created this team, people from literally Jamaica, Finland, Mozambique, just making this amazing collective of people just like on this mission. And so I was on a spiritual mountaintop of my life coming out of that. And I came back and I'm just talking to people in America on the streets. I'm like, guys, listen, like, I know you guys want to debate about ideas, but I'm telling you, God is 100% real. And let me tell you the story. And I started to like realize that there is a paradigm in the American consciousness that there is something being believed that makes the things that I'm saying unbelievable. And I became very curious about that question. What do you believe about reality that makes what I'm saying so unbelievable? That question led into the documentary film that I made called Mining for God. So I spent 2 years then taking the street interviews of these questions and then going to William Lane Craig and Lee Strobel and Gary Habermas and trying to answer that question. What are these big obstacles in the American consciousness that block people from being able to rightly understand Christianity? So all of that turned into a documentary film that I made, which then kind of started the like path toward the idea of like production and content and whatever. That film was not super successful, financially or whatever.
Is it on YouTube still?
I'm actually depending on when we release this, I'm actually going to be offering it for free for the first time since it was made. There's a long story that is not really relevant as to why that is the case. But yeah, so it's basically going to be free in the very near future.
Okay. So it's not publicly out yet.
No.
Okay.
Then I met my wife and had to pivot into like putting food on the table and all of that. And then like you mentioned, the big media company that I worked for, and it kind of came around to a point where it just became clear. It's like, man, I think that I have this like desire to use content and media and the things that I've learned about that for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, and it's not going away. And I think at some point it was just like, I need to quit everything and just go.
It was a dream job.
The job that I had was a dream job.
Yeah. Well, for one of the biggest creators out there.
Yeah, I know. And it was one of those
and
things.
You walked away from it.
I walked away. Yeah. And I did feel a sense of, is this stupid? Am I just like high in the sky, or like why am I like, is this a good choice? And very much aware there's 100 people behind you in line. But yeah, I wrestled with that for about 3 months. I prayed and fasted for 1 week. And on the Thursday of that week, I got a call from a friend whose brother is another creator and was looking for a producer. And that became, to me, like the clarity that I needed. I was already 90% there, but that was, and the fact that it happened during that week where I was really looking for an answer, that became the clarity that I needed to go ahead and quit that job, and then to kind of go into a more casual type of thing in order to then also kind of begin working, or not in order to, but it ended up being the case that through that job, I had a little bit more time to start to think about this type of content.
And Daily Dose of Wisdom is launched after you quit the job and fully take the plunge over, or were you already kind of dabbling? Where were you at with everything?
No, I wasn't I wasn't allowed to do, nor was I doing any content for Daily Dose of Wisdom while I was employed by this bigger company.
Like that was in the contract. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you transition off, and then how long from when you transition off to when you actually start the YouTube?
Well, it's funny, I don't know if your experience was different with this or not, but for me, everything was very much of just an experiment. So it wasn't like I'm going all in. It was more of like, oh, you see some video on YouTube and you're like, oh, I have thoughts about that. And you kind of just kind of do it, but it's, and then you release that and it's like, oh, nothing really happened with that. So there wasn't like a immediate start date. It was more of like, I have some space in my life, some time now to where I can, I don't know, I have the bandwidth to actually think about things that I'm watching naturally. And then I just started saying, you know what, let me just kind of, literally the first couple of videos was just with an iPhone. It's like, play the video on an iPhone. Yeah. So, here's some of my thoughts about this, whatever. So it kind of started like that. And then at some point I was like thinking, I should probably be a little bit more organized or intentional about it. And then I don't know the exact timeline, but somewhere along the way it started going well. And then it was very cool as well, because that second job that I mentioned ended up having a clear end to it from the person who hired me for a number of other reasons, zero bad blood, but it just became obvious that there was going to be a parting of ways. But throughout that period of time, God had kind of been providing and building up the Daily Dose of Wisdom thing, so that about 4 months ago now, that ended, and it then became clear, okay, I guess I'm gonna do this full time.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.